we are going to move to our final presentation of the afternoon. And Tracy, can you join us again and say hello? I can see you. Okay. Thank you so
Hi,
much. Can
everybody.
you say hello?
I sure can. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Again, my name is Tracy Baker, and I want to welcome you to the Leading with Empathy session. This is one of those topics that I'm really passionate about because it kind of defines who I am and the style I approach life with. Listening and speaking from the heart are two very important traits for me. I look forward to diving deeper into this with you. A little about myself, as you may have heard earlier on the panel. I'm married. I have two daughters who are 24 and 28. Both are in different stages of their life, with my oldest having gone back to school for nursing this past fall, and my youngest out in the workforce looking to pursue her fashion dream and share her fashion style by launching her online boutique in a few months. I've been married for the last 30 years, and if there's one thing in life that life has taught me, it's that it's not predictable. My husband, 8 years my senior, came home from work 2 weeks ago and casually mentioned after dinner that he had resigned from his job effective immediately. The thoughts that ran through my head and the words that I so badly wanted to say, I held on to tightly, willing myself to listen to what he had to say, why he did what he had done, and seeking to understand before reacting. Understanding his reasons to be very valid, I employed my emotional intelligence with him and talked through the next steps. Enough about that, though. I don't really have any new updates at this time. As I shared, I work for Sodexo. I do work with I act as a consultant for our operators, our clients, our students. I work in the university's department. So when I say our students, I don't mean mine personally. I mean the ones that we support. And I find that, empathy, emotional intelligence, the soft side, the skill side, sometimes is often misplaced. And I'm hoping I can share a little information with you today that can help make you a stronger, more empathetic manager, and to put that emotional intelligence under it to kind of build off of it. So next slide, please. Like I said, today is kind of about making connections. I know it's hard in a virtual world, but the kind of connection I'm referring to is within yourself. It's your brain and your heart. They both want to lead in different capacities, although often it isn't the answer. Today, I hope to leave you with information to help you balance the two and make them both equals. Sometimes one might outweigh the other, but for the most part, they kind of need to sit in an equal platform. Understanding at the end of the day, I ask that understanding that it is the end of the day, and it's been a long day, and I'm sure you've heard some great content. I've listened to all the presentations myself. I ask that you be as present as possible. Don't multitask if you can. It's only 20 to 25 minutes. And the other thing I ask is to have a piece of paper handy, because there are things I'll ask you throughout the session that I want you to maybe either take a note of or write your thoughts down. Again, just trying to keep a little bit of the engagement going as we go. So on the next slide, we talk about the 3 goals for today. And honestly, they're pretty simple. I want to hone your skills to provide you with a better understanding and tools for you to be successful on a daily basis. Again, taking into consideration and talking about effective communication, navigating interactions and connecting across differences. The skills are applicable anywhere, any place, whether it be at home, at work, with clients, outside of work, inside of work, friends, neighbors, family. Everything I talk about today is really an overall encompassing skill that doesn't have to be pigeonholed to one place. I'm going to talk about the emotional intelligence and the building blocks that go into emotional intelligence. As I did some research on this and kind of put this together, I was a little surprised to learn a few things, and it made me reflect and recognize some of it within myself. And I thought, okay, these are good things I can use in different situations. And the last thing is, I want to provide you with tools to create more engaged and committed teams, understanding the principles, in turn, creating opportunity for us to share, coach, mentor, which only solidifies us as an effective leader. So on the next slide, I talk about mindset, right? So mindset is kind of about being intentional, and being intentional is what empathy requires. We need to develop a mindset as leaders that we care about humanity. And we heard Tracy before me talking about, that balance. And that's really important, because when we show and we develop a sense of humility and humanity, it makes our people that we work with, and or if you take it into the personal life, the people that we live with kind of have a better understanding. And I kind of shared that when I framed up the situation with my husband. So on the next slide, I ask you to define empathetic leadership. And, if you want to drop a comment or two in chat about what it means to you, if you want to write it on a piece of paper, I'm okay with that either way. But I just want you to reflect for 1 second before we go in. What does empathetic leadership mean? Thank you, Jolene. So when we look at the next slide, we talk about definition and we talk about defining. So I appreciate you taking the time to think about a definition. As we know, every definition is different. And when I looked up empathy in the dictionary, I got 32 different definitions. So walking into today's session, we all might have had a different opinion, a thought. And at the end of the session, we still may be different. But as long as it ties to what matters to us and how we can imply it, that's what matters. There is no right or wrong. I am going to establish some working definitions, though, for the next bit that we're going to go into. So when I talk about defining leadership on the next slide, I'm talking about some of the things that I built into today's presentation and their definitions so that we kind of stay together. And there's a difference when you think about between the definition of being a manager and being a leader. So according to Warren Bennett in the book on becoming a leader, managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. So again, it's a choice, right? Do you want to be somebody who does things right, or do you want to be somebody who does the right thing? And again, neither may be right or wrong, but it's do you want to be a manager or do you want to be a leader in life? And that's how you kind of can define where you want to go. So on the next slide, I talk about developing empathy and defining empathy. And when I think about empathy, I think about that empathy is what fuels that connection, right? It is the perspective when we talk about taking and staying out of judgment and recognizing emotions in other people's and then communicating that. Empathy is connecting with people so we know that we're not alone in a struggle. It's a way to connect the emotions another person is feeling and experiencing it with you. And it's feeling with people, right? And with being emphasized, it's a feeling with people. So we can create a space where people are seen and heard, and we listen genuinely to try to understand what they're going through. And that's kind of the thought process that we want to take. So when we go to the next topic about what behaviors does an empathetic leadership demonstrate, again, if you look at the next slide, we kind of lay out that platform. So when you think about an empathetic leader and you think about what they do and how they do it, what characteristics are you looking for? What does it mean to you when you say, oh, I want to be or I want to have an empathetic leader? And usually some of the words that I think of or that I hear are like empathetic leaders demonstrate kindness. They show curiosity. They ask questions. They have gratitude. They're thankful to have their employees. And they do active listening. And active listening is so important. And so many times we get stifled between our next response versus listening to what's being said. And we have to take a step back. Some important tips to remember in our journey as an empathetic leader is to be kind, to be curious, to know that you don't have to fix it. We always want to fix people and make it better for them, but sometimes they just want you to listen and they want you to hear what they have to say. Connecting and listening is so powerful. And to achieve that, in my opinion, is to achieve part of that ultimate standard of good leadership. Some of the other things, try to understand how a person is feeling, not necessarily how you feel in the situation, but how are they feeling? Again, it's that active listening, hearing what they're saying. Help people know that they're not alone in their feelings. Even if you never had that experience, you can still show that you understand the feeling and that you can relate to what they felt. And maybe you can give them some ideas about, hey, I've never experienced this personally. This is how I would have interpreted it. But again, listen and validate first. Let people know that you're grateful that they shared with you. Again, when you talk about being an empathetic leader and building that relationship. And really that's what leadership is about, is relationships. It's really about, being genuine, bringing your whole self and letting them know, hey, I appreciate that you trusted me, because they didn't have to come to you. The more you convey that, the more they will feed off of that. Ultimately, when you think about empathetic leadership, it's about respect and belonging. It's pretty simple. What we have talked about already is that empathetic leaders have the capacity to demonstrate respect and create a sense of belonging. And that's how you want to leave people feeling. And on the next slide, I illustrate some of the benefits of empathetic leadership, right? So again, why do you want to be an empathetic leader? What do you get out of it? Well, building good relationships and promoting teamwork are such a good opportunity to have strong relationships with those we work with versus adverse relationships. Empathetic leaders in leadership make people want to do things for you. They want to succeed. They want to give you 100%. Your success is their success because they feel an emotional connection to you. They feel like, hey, I like this person. I respect this person. This person respects me, and I don't want to let them down. We talked earlier in the panel. I heard it on another person's talk track this in one of these sessions, but supporting that work-life balance, the need for someone to feel safe and not be afraid to ask for time off, to go to a game, a practice, or a recital. I shared earlier about my boss who had non-negotiables. Friday night, he didn't travel. He had 5 states. It didn't matter. On Friday afternoon, he was home. On Friday morning, he woke up at home, and he didn't travel that day. And it made me respect him so much more because he was setting a precedent, and he was sending a message to the team that it was okay to put up a boundary. It was okay to say no. And when we allow that balance, we increase the relationship and the productivity, right? We had a meeting and it was somebody's anniversary, and they happened to say it was their anniversary. And the same leader said, well, come the next day to the meeting. The meeting is the meeting is the meeting. The content is always going to be there, but your anniversary and your wife aren't. So it's balancing the priorities without being taken advantage of, without letting people overstep, but letting them know that you care. What's important to them is important to you, and that you value their personal happiness to the success of your team. When people feel cared about and supported and they trust their leader, their productivity goes up so high, right? Again, they want to give, they want to produce, they want you to be proud of them. And their creativity goes up because they're not afraid, right? If you think about innovation and ideation and being in meetings, people stifle, right? You get 2 or 3 people who do all the talking. You could have 10 people in a room. You could have 20 people in a room. The other 7 to 17 aren't saying anything because they're afraid. But when you create that environment of open, empathetic leadership, understanding, trust, people are more apt to feel it, and they will be more willing to give, share that vision. It all makes sense, right? So why don't we all do it? Why don't leaders possess these skills? Sometimes they don't know, and sometimes they do. And on the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about bias, because bias is a big conscious and or unconscious challenger in our normal day and life. So I think part of the reason why leaders struggle to be empathetic is that sometimes they just don't know and they don't recognize it. We all want to think that we aren't biased. We have no unconscious biases, but the reality is that we do. So here's a simple illustration, right? The person on the left sees number 6, whereas the person on the right sees number 9. This illustrates a concept known as observer bias, which is the tendency to observe, not to see what is there, but instead to see what they expect or want to see, right? I'm looking at it from one angle, it's a 9. She's looking at it from another angle, it's a 6. Each person in this picture is interpreting the meaning and the value of the image in front of them based on their perspective, not some objective truth. We could spend hours exploring over the 60 different types of bias and their implications, but let's just talk about a few more before we move on. When driving, you get cut off, and your first thought is to yell, "What a jerk," maybe not so nicely. That's a fundamental attribution error, right? It could be at play. By slowing down and by not automatically going there, we're far more likely to consider that it could have been an honest mistake. He didn't see you. He didn't mean to cut you off. Maybe we've done it ourselves, right? We don't want somebody to think that of us. But when we're not in the driver's seat, we have to either assume or attribute and decide what it really is. Another situation, you walk up, you're in a group meeting, you've gone on a break, you've gone to the ladies' room or the restroom, you come back, and there are two people talking and they're laughing as you walk up. Do you think, oh, they're laughing at you? Or do you think, oh, I wonder what they're talking about? So are you experiencing a hostile attribution bias by thinking that they're talking about you? If the impulse to give preferential treatment to people in your own social or identity group is something that you find yourself doing, that's considered an in-group bias. I find that I travel with a lot of people and I support a lot of different teams. And there's a core group of people that I always work with, that always come no matter what the account is and what we're doing. So my unconscious bias is to give an in-group bias to the people that I travel with. And in recognizing that, it helps me to be a better balanced leader and conduct better sessions. And the last bias I think about is confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is if we were to gather evidence that supports what we already believe rather than play devil's advocate, right? It's so easy to assume something is true because that's your feeling and that's your belief, when in reality, if we just flip the situation around and played a little devil's advocate on ourselves, we would blow that theory out of the water. So in closing, I just want to say, be less concerned about what the bias is. Instead, bring them to the forefront and focus on the implication. In doing so, you'll be far better positioned to avoid flattening people into stereotypes that oversimplify and fail to accomplish each person as an individual, and you will likely change your own behaviors. Being self-aware is critical to empathetic leaders. Really a hard task. So I just want to go to the next slide and take a quick pause in a self-reflection. I want you to think about how often you're aware of your own biases. If they're left unchecked, our thinking and behavior becomes skewed. Write down on a piece of paper how often you experience mental shortcuts. Remember, bias is not inherently bad. However, it has a negative implication when it gets in the way of objective decision-making or impacts the way we treat people, particularly those who have experienced some sort of a difference on their own. So if you wrote often, occasional, seldom, those are common answers where people fall into. If you wrote always or never, I would just coach you a little bit to say, push harder on either side of the spectrum. When you're making an assumption, is it a bias or is it an assumption? When you're in a situation that somebody cuts you off, steps in front of you in the grocery store, stops short in an aisle, what is your first thought? Is it a bias? And if you are always recognizing your biases, I would challenge you to not be as critical and to really reflect on what you're recognizing. So let's put some application into place. Close your eyes and imagine that you're on the next slide, close your eyes and imagine that you're in the middle of a room, right? You're working on a report for your boss. You're sitting at your desk. You are behind on a deadline, and you were supposed to be done in the next 15 or 20 minutes, and you know you have a good 30 to 45 minutes worth of work to do. Somebody knocks on your door, and it's a person on your team. May not be your most favorite person on the team, but it's a person on the team, and they jump in and they say, hey, Tracy, I have a problem. I don't feel part of the team. I feel like they don't take me seriously. They don't listen when I talk, when we're in group settings. I don't get the attention I need, and it's really bothering me. Okay, so now somebody has just totally broke your train of thought. They have interrupted your space. They are really kind of threw you for a loop, right? Do you stop what you're doing, look at them and reflect on what they're saying? Do you keep typing and answer them in a short manner? Do you recognize that you don't have the time to be empathetic or to listen and ask them to come back later? Or do you give them 100% of your attention? Most people in this situation will listen half-heartedly instead of asking them to come back or stop what they're doing to listen and engage. One would hope that empathetic leadership would come naturally, but unfortunately, it's not always the case. The good news is it's a skill that can be learned. That being said, even those who are committed to upskilling as empathetic leaders will not find it to be a straight path forward, hence the image on the map. It looks more like that squiggly, all over the place, up, down, across loop, especially when we're busy or stressed or when we face our own personal challenges and conflicts. How do you be there for everybody? Some challenges occur when we're connecting across differences. How many times in a situation or an interaction have you wished that you had the opportunity to do it over? We're all a work in progress. So let's acknowledge that we're not perfect. We can give ourselves and one another grace and meet each other where we are and recognize that it's through practice that we will make progress. So I'm going to give you an acronym on the next slide, and I'm going to go through it real quick, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence. So the acronym is MIND. And when I think about mind, I think about mindful, and that's what I ask you to do. And being mindful can help us level up. Check out this MIND acronym. The elements of it don't always have to be sequential, and they can overlap at the same time. But take a moment. It's one of the most important advice somebody gave to me is step back, take a moment, pause. We talk about it when we're speaking. Take a pause. It's okay. And it's the same thing in a conversation. It's not saying that I'm not listening, I'm ignoring you. It's saying, hey, I want to think about my response. Integrate, notice, and demonstrate. So let's go to moment on the next slide, right? The first element. It sounds really simple, but it's not always even easy given how busy we are. By pausing, we gain the time necessary to reflect on what we're feeling. We're able to give them time to reflect briefly on what we heard, and the other person might need a moment after they've just shared everything with you. Pausing helps us to become less likely to become hijacked by our emotions, right? Sometimes when we are able to step back, we're able to put things in balance. The goal is to respond rather than to react to what we're experiencing. On the next slide, when we talk about integrating can help us bring together the various perspectives that exist instead of having tunnel vision that aligns only with our vision and views. We can hold space for the fact that there are many different unique perspectives, some very different than our own, while grounding ourselves in our shared community. By actively listening, we can demonstrate that we genuinely are seeking to understand. This requires that we use both verbal and nonverbal cues, and we observe the nonverbal and verbal cues that are being communicated. How often are we distracted or thinking about our response? Ask yourself, am I paying complete attention and keeping an open mind? Am I demonstrating I see you and I hear you? The goals, as difficult as it can be to be fully present, which allows us to have greater clarity on the whole situation. So the third element, notice, on the next slide, is really about just that. Do your best to consider what is potentially getting in the way of an effective interaction. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are the possible gaps between your perception and reality? Take the opportunity to explore any biases that may be in play, not only to include your own. As an ally, you may observe biases that may be influencing others' perspectives as well. To notice is to be aware, and that is critical for empathetic leadership. When it comes to biases, initially, you'll be more likely to recognize when they are at play while reflecting back on an interaction. Over time, they become easier to notice in the moment. The ultimate goal is to interrupt the bias before it shows up in your behavior or the actions you take. It takes a lot of practice. And then being a mindful leader is being intentional. And we talk about on the next slide about demonstrating that full empathy and respect. By remembering that every person and every interaction is unique, we can more consistently keep up with an open mind, assume positive intent versus jumping to conclusions that aren't necessarily in our own best interest or in another's best interest. Okay, I want to take a slight shift now and talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. So we talked a lot about empathy. On the next slide, we talk about emotional intelligence and how emotional intelligence and empathy tie in together. And I'm sorry this slide is a little hard to read, but I'm going to try to kind of give us an overview and talk about building blocks, right? So empathy is about the way we display to others. Empathetic intelligence is turning the focus a little bit more inward on ourselves, right? So we are self-recognizing, we're self-regulating, we are self-evaluating. We're starting with our self-recognition, and ourself. What is our self-awareness of our actions and our responses? Are you emotionally aware of the situation? Is your self-assessment accurate, or is there a hidden bias? Where is your self-confidence level? Because when you have confidence, that's portrayed to others. Do you own your game, or are you struggling with the imposter syndrome floating around in your mind? The other self-trait to think about that you should be in control of is your emotions. Are you mentally present? Are you transparent? Do you show everything? Do you have a stone face? What is being conveyed, and what emotions are you reflecting on? What transfers into meaning and feelings, and how can others follow you? Are you adaptable? Do you flex at conversations or shift in plans, or do you stay up? We said this and we're going this way. And let's move to the social aspect now that we've looked at ourselves. What's your social awareness? How are you in that situation? Are you comfortable with what's going on around you? Are you comfortable in the environment? You need to be ready to manage the relationship, influence others, develop others, and stand up for a change and be inspirational all at once. And it's all part of a package of you and your confidence and who you are and the emotional intelligence you bring to work or life. There's so much that goes into building and creating your emotional intelligence. So on the next slide, I want to show you the building blocks, right? Again, 4 categories: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. When you think about these 4 traits, these 4 blocks, these are the pillars of who you build yourself upon and how you project. So your self-awareness, it's about you, it's about your confidence, it's about your emotional awareness. How do you act and feel? How do you show up? What's the image you impress on others? My husband used to say to my daughters every day when they were little growing up, fake it till you make it. They could repeat that back, but it was easy enough for them to grasp it no matter what age. On the days you're waning in belief or assurance, remember, you're the only one who knows that. You're the only one who knows how you feel inside. So fake it till you make it. Keep projecting that strong outside image, the one that people know and respect, and the one everybody has come to really enjoy and enjoy working with. When you think about self-management and that building block and what comes under it, taking control of yourself, your emotions, the situation, are you trustworthiness? Are you adaptable? What innovation do you share? Being trusted, to me, is the biggest gift anyone can give you. Stop and ask yourself, what is your level of trustworthiness? Do people come to you? Do they confide in you? Do they seek you out for advice? How not only do you earn it on a daily basis, but keep it for the long run? Because trust is a gift. It's given, but it can also be taken away, and you never want to be in that situation. The next building block, social awareness. It's two big categories to balance: empathy and organizational awareness. In an ever-changing world, empathy is so important, right? Our feelings, our situation, our views are just that, they're our own. And we control how that affects us every day. But the people we work with, the people we live with, the people who we may surround ourselves with, we can't control it for them. What we can do for them is steer and support them, right? We can show empathy, we can listen, we can appreciate what they're going through, and we can organize our thoughts and our awareness so that we are offering the right solutions. We may not be the final decision makers in a lot of things in life, but helping others adjust to change through empathy and awareness are two good steps that we can provide along the way. And then finally, relationship management. Relationship management in any situation is something that has to transpire daily. It's something that changes situation by situation. It's not scripted. There's nothing that happens that is in life that goes by a book. So one day you're an influencer. The next day you might be mediating conflict resolution. Regardless, you're always being a leader, and you're hopefully always communicating in a strong, concise, caring, empathetic way to help solve, resolve, and allow both folks to have a personal win so that they walk away feeling good about themselves, what they've said, what they've shared, and enabling trust in the feeling of support and care. I noticed we're running in a little bit on time, so I'm actually going to ask you to Ginger to skip over to skip 3 slides up to where it says core emotional intelligence competencies. One more. Okay. Again, these slides are going to be hosted on the Women's Forum site. So, and if not, I'm happy to share them with you. But emotional intelligence, this chart is important because it's how we kind of put it all together. It's putting it in perspective, right? So we've got the not so great responses, where we become disconnected and insensitive and viewed as untrustworthy or indifferent. And that's not how we are, how we want others to perceive us. But when we process the emotional intelligence competencies, we're perceived as somebody who's present, we're genuine, we're empathetic, we're resilient. And the way the chart works is like, so somebody might see me as being disconnected, but if I focus on self-awareness, then people are going to see me as being present because they see me disconnected because I'm not giving them time or attention or space. They might see me as untrustworthy because they don't feel like I give them eye contact. I don't make them feel important. I don't make them feel like I've really brought myself to the situation. But when I'm authentic and I can relate and correspond to what they're saying, then they view me as being a genuine person. So this slide is really a good representation. And the last one on it is about being indifferent, right? So again, somebody comes in and you don't really give them a response, or you're on a phone call and they're asking for advice and you find your mind wandering. We've got to stop and be present in the moment so that we don't seem indifferent, right? We want to give them that positive influence that we care, like, yes, I heard you. Yes, I think that's a great idea. I think you should go in this direction. Or no, I think that's good, but I also think you're missing this one piece. Because then they see us as empowering. They see us as verifying and validating what they're thinking. So on the next slide, in wrapping up, I just want you to think about this. I know this was a lot of information when we talk about empathy, when we talk about emotional intelligence and how it all comes together. Just stop and think about it, and stop and think about ways you can incorporate it into your day on a daily basis. On the next slide, really, it's just a reiteration of what empathy is. It's about listening. It's about seeing and feeling. How do you know if you're empathetic? Do people come to you? Do they talk to you? Does your phone ring off the hook? Are people seeking your advice? Are you seeing people for who they are? Are you seeing with their eyes and capturing their vision so that when they do seek you out and they do want you to listen, you can actually feel the situation because you've seen it and then feeling? Are you using your heart to feel the heart of somebody else's? Are you feeling what they feel? And people say there's no feelings in business, but you know what? If we don't have feelings in business, we're not going to have business. There's lots of feelings in life, and how do we manage those? And that becomes part of it. So the 3 things when you think about empathy is listening, seeing, and feeling. And on the next slide, the 4 things when we think about emotional intelligence is those building blocks: that self-awareness, the self management, the social awareness, and the relationship management, knowing who you are as a leader on the next slide, what you give to others and how you're perceived, and about being present, being in the moment, providing others what they need, being the leader that you wish you have today or that you maybe previously had. So that's how I always project myself, is how do I project? How do I be the best? And I want to be what I want. from a leader. So I try to keep those things in balance with myself. In closing, on the last slide, I just want to say there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to discover empathetic leadership in the workplace, in the community, at home, with friends, with family, maybe in church, in all different social environments. Some ways you can practice is think about that mindful leadership model we talked about, notice, demonstrate, take a moment to be present, become aware of your biases, consider the other person's point of view, own it. That personal ownership is so important. Challenge behaviors and actions, and give yourself and others grace. Often I hear us say things to ourselves that we would never say to a friend or a colleague or out loud. So give yourself that same grace. I always say it's progress, not perfection, right? The reality is I will never be perfect, no matter how long I do this for. And I'm kidding myself if I think I am. But if I'm making progress every day, that's what's important. And in the spirit of creating that psychological safety, when, not if I make a mistake, I have empathy with myself, and then I just continue to practice. And I would say that to yourself, to you, when you make a mistake, have empathy, give yourself grace, and then continue practicing onward. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry we went a little long today. I hope it was beneficial to you all, and I'll turn it back to Ginger for maybe some questions and or closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. We definitely all learned a lot from it today. I'll start with a few questions. This one came in early in your presentation. And Alina says, how can I show empathy, but not be seen as a pushover?
I think that's a great question. And, the reality is showing empathy doesn't mean saying yes. It just means that you're showing that you understand the situation, you understand what's being conveyed to you, you understand what you've heard. Empathy people can confuse it, but it's not about all me giving. It's about being present and being my authentic self and allowing you to be your authentic self and accepting you for who you are. And then working through it together. I work in customer service, we always say the customer's never wrong, but it doesn't mean they're always right either. So be you, stand firm on the positions, but be open-minded.
Well, that's good. Thank you so much. And our next question is, I think I'm empathetic, but how do I know?
If you think you are, you probably are. But again, I would say, look at a few situations and evaluate how you reacted, or make it a point to, on the next couple of ones, practice those skills. Are you listening? Are you feeling? Are you getting what they say? Are you seeing them for who they are? Are you hearing what the messages that they're trying to convey? And then think about, what was your response? What did you do? How did you do it? And really, where did you end up? So, what actions did you show? What attributes did you use? When you think about empathetic leadership, there's that whole circle of how do I act and display, and what do I listen? What do I say? So I think that's the way to tell whether you are or not. And again, I think if you're asking, you probably know the answer.
Well said. Thank you. All right, our final question, and then we'll ask you for some final thoughts, is Serena says, can you teach emotional intelligence? I work with a group of scientists.
I'll say it made me laugh. And you can definitely teach it. It's whether the person will receive it. So, again, because it's about self-awareness and self-management, you can teach the basic principles, as with most principles, but whether somebody chooses to adapt it or not, that could be a whole different thing. I mean, left brain, right brain theory, and how much do they choose to understand and adapt?
Well said. Well, thank you so much for doing double duty today. So as we wrap for the afternoon, do you have any final words of wisdom for our viewers today?
I have two things. One, I would say, is just be true to yourself, and treat others how you want to be treated. Because if you do, you can't fail. The other thing is in the comments, Chanel had commented, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Empathy is understanding the concern and coming together to provide a solution. To our scientists, it's not rocket scientists. It's just about being human.
Well said. Thank you so much. Well, we really appreciate your time and your wonderful thoughts today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our speakers today, both our panelists and our keynote speakers. And thank you to all of our viewers as well and your fantastic questions. So please be safe and be kind to yourself. So until next time, this is Ginger Whatley signing off. Have a great afternoon, everyone.